Yes, Miss McCall.
Thank you, sir. Sergeant Maxwell, can I ask you first of all about your understanding of one or two of the radio messages that you've been referred to?
Certainly.
And I wonder if you could just have the timeline, the transcript timeline in front of you so that you can read the relevant messages. And I'm hoping we can also play one to you. So the first message I'm interested in, you'll see it's on page 1, and it's 071632 from Controller 1, and it's the message that you were referred to yesterday about diverting to Henry Road, disturbance ongoing, male armed with a knife, etc. And I'm hoping with assistance that we can play that message to you, and I wonder if you could listen in particular to the part of the message that follows African-looking male. So the part that is chasing someone, maybe carrying a knife, described as. So that part of the message, and then I'll ask you about it.
Right. I need you to divert to Henry Road, a disturbance ongoing, male armed with a knife, African-looking male chasing someone that may be carrying a knife, described as big with muscles, about 6 foot tall, wearing a white t-shirt and dark coloured jeans. There's another girl coming in about stand by.
Thank you. So yesterday, Sergeant Maxwell, Senior Counsel Inquiry pointed out to you that a pause can be heard between chasing and someone. In your view, is there a pause between someone and maybe carrying a knife or not?
Yes, there is a gap.
And did that second pause between someone and maybe carrying a knife have any impact on your interpretation of the message that the male was chasing someone and that he had a knife?
Yes, the way it came across to me is that the person described as having the knife was actively chasing someone.
Right. And you were asked yesterday by Senior Counsel, would it have made a difference if he was just chasing cars or just walking around the street with a knife? And you said, no, it would still be a grade 1 call. From your understanding of the message from control, did you think that this was an ongoing incident or not?
It was an ongoing incident, a potential threat to life.
Thank you. I wonder if you could turn then to page 3 of the timeline. And yesterday you had said to Counsel to the Inquiry that when you issued your message about all units attending, and you said bearing in mind officer safety, that was you issuing a stay safe message, put short, because your officers would know what you meant.
Yes.
Do you remember saying that? Just looking on page 3 at 072013, do you see there's a message from the Area Control Room, Inspector Stewart?
Yes.
I'm just going to read that to you. Inspector Stewart, Area Control Room to the set attending. I'm monitoring this obviously from an ARV perspective. If you get sightings of the male, you need to make an initial assessment yourself and feedback through straight away, and I'll listen out on the channel. There was a suggestion earlier in evidence to the inquiry that what Inspector Stewart was doing there was conveying a stay safe message from the control room. Do you recognise that as a stay safe message from the control room?
No.
What would a stay safe message from control contain?
There's a specific, I'm not sure if there was a specific script at the time, just in relation to officers to observe their safety in terms of reaction gap, cut principle if required. But it's very specific to stay safe rather than look at it for an overview.
All right, thank you.
Just before you leave, would you understand that to be an order given by Inspector Stewart to the set arriving?
Only if they assessed it as requiring an armed response vehicle at that time, sir.
Is that the way you understand it?
Yes.
Thank you.
And does that, just following up on that if I may, sir, does that, Sergeant Maxwell, accord with your evidence yesterday that the officers attending retain autonomy in how they
Yes.
initially deal with the incident?
That's correct.
I wanted then to ask you, please, about your understanding at the time of the availability of specialist resources and confirmation about the position. This is just to clarify a matter. So yesterday you were referred at page 2 of the timeline to your message at 07:19:12. Control from 411, is there any update from ARV or dog units over? So you were chasing up a response. And at 07:19:17, Controller 1, I believe a dog unit is en route. And I think what you told us yesterday was that you didn't take that to be clear information that a dog was coming, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And what you also said yesterday was it was only when you were at the scene that it was confirmed to you that a dog was coming.
That's correct.
Can I ask you please to look at a message at 07:24:11, which is on the top of page 7. And at the top there, do you see it's a message from Gary Wood, dog unit. Yeah, I'm en route from Edinburgh. I take it this is the same nail with the knife, yeah? Do you see that?
Yes.
Was that the message that provided you with confirmation that a dog was definitely coming?
Yeah, that was a form of confirmation that a dog had been allocated. The officer within that unit had come on to our channel and stated that they're on the way.
And I think what he's told you, in terms of the information that you said yesterday you would want to get, he's told you he's coming from Edinburgh, is that
Yes.
right? He's not given you an ETA, but I suppose at least you have some idea of the distance he's travelling.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. You can set that timeline to the side. I wanted to ask you to clarify your evidence about your consideration of terrorism in relation to this incident.
Yes.
So just to assist you with where it is in your statements, in your inquiry statement, if you have that, you'll find it at paragraph 5.
Oh, I've got it there, that's fine.
It might be helpful for you, Sergeant, to have the document, the hard document in front of you. So you'll see at the second paragraph of that answer, you say, for the avoidance of doubt, because I know the inquiry is going to examine this issue, I was aware of the threat level to national security and police officers as being severe, and that there had been high-profile incidents in relation to terrorism in the United Kingdom. However, my risk assessment at that time did not take terrorism into account and would only have if credible evidence was available. So that's one thing you've said about terrorism and its connection to your risk assessment. Can I ask you then to look at your Perk Statement 267, your notes, forgive me. And it's at page 4 of those. It's just towards the bottom. That's great, thanks. So it's about 12 lines up from the bottom, a part of me considered. You see that? A part of me considered
Yes.
this to be terrorism-related incident based on recent intelligence and the threat level to serving officers in the United Kingdom. So those are two things you've said in writing
Yeah.
prior to the inquiry commencing. And what you said yesterday to senior counsel to the inquiry is that you explained that it crossed your mind that terrorism might be a factor, as did a number of other things.
Yes.
And you mentioned mental health, you mentioned the possibility of
Yeah.
suicide and so on. So just to try and clarify that, did you come to the view that this incident was connected with terrorism or not?
I came to the view that it was not linked to terrorism.
Did that go through your mind at any point as a possibility that you should think about?
Yes, it did.
Did you or did you not discount that possibility?
I discounted it through the decision-making process I made in my head, yeah.
And did the fact that that went through your mind as a possibility, albeit you discounted it, affect any of your actions or decisions that you made that day?
No.
Thank you. Can I move on then to ask you about your Perk Statement, which is 266. And you've been asked a number of questions about your description of what officers were doing in this document. And you remember being asked to explain the difference between lying on someone and leaning on someone. When you were giving this statement to the Perk, did they ask you questions as you were giving the statement?
Yes.
And when you've described what civilians or untrained people might think something looked like versus what it was in terms of lying on someone or not, and you've said a number of times no one was lying on them, did the Perk indicate to you at any point that someone had told them that they thought police officers were lying on Mr. Bio, or words to that effect?
I can't recall specifically if there was any mention of that.
Did the Perk ask you if anyone was lying on Mr. Bio?
Again, I can't 100% say that they asked that directly.
But should we understand from you saying that they did ask you questions that some of what's contained in that statement is a response to questions they asked you?
Prompts, yeah.
Prompts?
Well, questions along the lines, so yeah.
To be fair, perhaps prompted as to a topic they were interested
Yes.
in, is that fair?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Now can I ask you about your notes, which are Perk 00267. And you've been asked a number of questions about these notes and referred to them a number of times. I just want to assist the chair in what he should make, if anything, of these notes. You've described writing them, I think, early the following morning. I think you said you'd had a little bit of sleep that night. What sort of condition were you in when you wrote these notes?
Still upset and in shock from not necessarily the incident as a whole, but more how the people had reacted and seeing my colleagues in that state. Trying to ascertain what was going to happen with it all. These notes were made for my consumption only, and that was a kind of self-coping mechanism to make me feel better, and also to try and give me prompts as well, so I could remember sort of key points. But ultimately, they were for my benefit only. I've not written them in any specific statement writing skill or any style. It's just been notes.
And we see them here in a particular form. I take it this is not the form in which you produced them.
No.
Were they handwritten by you or
No, they were
computer?
word processed.
Word processed.
Yeah.
And I take it the form we see them in here is a form generated by the Perk from what you handed them.
Yes.
All right. Did you ever intend those notes to be for an external audience?
No.
If there is information in those notes or something is expressed in a particular way in those notes that's not repeated in either your formal Perk statement or your statement to the inquiry, should the chair take it that on reflection either that wasn't accurate or it wasn't the way you wanted to express it?
Yes, as I mentioned yesterday in my evidence, there was some of the way in which the things were conveyed wasn't how I would put it in a statement, or certainly not how I would choose to present my evidence.
Might that...
Sorry. Clarify that, because the question you were asked was whether I should take it that on reflection, either it wasn't accurate or it wasn't the way you wanted to express it. Now, these are two different issues, and there's an important distinction between them. Are you saying that there are inaccurate things in this statement?
There are a couple of inaccuracies that, on reflection, when I gave my Perk Statement, I prefer the Perk Statement to stand.
Or perhaps you could tease that out, Ms. McCall.
I'll have to return to my position to get the note of that.
Very well.
Yes, sir. No, it's fine. Sergeant Maxwell, I'm going to go through one or two of these, and perhaps you can indicate whether from your recollection there are other things that are perhaps expressed differently. But if you look first of all at your notes, 267 at page 2, towards the bottom of the page, it's perhaps about 10 lines up. Do you see it says, on arrival at Locus?
Yes.
You describe, I witnessed a black-coloured male wearing a white T-shirt and jeans lying on the pavement on the southern side of Hayfield Road with officers trying to restrain him. Just bear with me. And then if we turn to your formal Perk Statement 266. I'll just get the reference. Give me a moment. It's at the top of page 5. I got out of my car and I could clearly see the black male lying on the ground. And you give a description of the direction and so on. In the last sentence there, he was lying on his left side and he was facing me. In terms of the difference, if there's a difference between those two, is the chair to prefer your Perk Statement as opposed to your notes?
Yeah, Perk Statement, please.
And then going back to your notes, in relation to the actions of other officers. Just bear with me. At the top of page 3, you say, from my observations, I believe PCs Smith, Walker, McDonough, Good, Payton and Gibson were initially involved in trying to restrain the male. And then you give a description of that.
Yes.
And then if we turn to your formal Perk Statement at page 5, and you were taken to this by, in large part by Senior Counsel Inquiry this morning, but do we see at the second paragraph you've described what Alan Smith was doing and where he was, then Ashley Tomlinson, then Alan Payton, then James McDonough, and then you get further on and you say PC Danny Gibson was standing near to James McDonough, slightly to the right. And then 2 paragraphs below that, you say, I also saw PC Kaylee Good. She was standing on the road just beyond the feet of the black male, taking observations. You see that?
Yes.
So insofar as that suggests that unlike your own notes, that Gibson and Good at that moment were not involved in the restraint of Mr. Bio, would you prefer your Perk statement or your notes?
Perk Statement.
And lastly, in relation to the matter we were just discussing a moment ago, that in your notes, your own notes, you had made reference to consideration of terrorism. You said, a part of me, this is at page 4, a part of me considered this to be terrorism-related incident. That is not contained at all in your formal Perk statement. And you've given an explanation of that in your inquiry statement, that you didn't take it into account. So should the Chair prefer your notes or your formal Perk statement and your inquiry statement?
Well, I did have the reference to the terrorism, so probably the notes in that respect.
So in the notes when you say a part of you considered this to be terrorism related, I think what you said to me a few moments ago was that that was something that
It went through
your
with
thought process.
Yes, absolutely.
But that you discounted it.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, are there any other points of your notes that you're aware of at this stage, Sergeant Maxwell, that you would like to correct?
I don't think so.
Thank you. The next issue I wanted to address with you is the expression operational statement, and whether from your perspective there is any difference between being asked for an operational statement or producing an operational statement and being asked for a witness statement. Is there any difference?
Witness statement would be in terms of being a witness to an incident. Operational statement more involving my context anyway. If I've been involved in anything that's happened, it's been a major incident or serious incident like a murder or various, that I would provide an operational statement before I terminated duty that day, which is a police operational statement.
And in terms of the police process of investigating a crime and reporting it to the Procurator Fiscal, you'll have experience, I suppose, of at some stage being asked to provide a witness statement of some kind, a statement of some kind to the Procurator Fiscal in support of a prosecution, is
Yes.
that right? Would that be described as an operational statement or a witness statement?
A witness statement.
So when you met with DCI Hardy and DI Wilson from the Major Investigation Team, Senior Counsel Inquiry put it to you this morning that they asked for an operational statement, and the inquiries heard evidence they were asking for statements on behalf of the Perk because the Perk was conducting an investigation. Did that cause you any confusion about what you were being asked for?
As I say, the stance I had at the time was that I was taking legal advice. I never really thought of it that way, operational witness statement, but you put it, the operational statement sounds more formal police process rather than a witness statement.
All right. Thank you. Now, could you have the timeline back in front of you, please? It was put to you this morning by Senior Counsel to the Inquiry that there may be an impression that you were more anxious to pursue the ambulance attending for PC Short than you were for PC Bio, and a distinction was drawn between them on the basis of their race. And I wanted just to ask you to comment on that. In that respect, can I take you to the transmissions that you made, please? And if you turn, first of all, to 072334, which is on page 6. So this is not long after you have arrived. Stephen Kay has asked you for an update on any injury to Constable Short. And do we see that you say, PC Short's been struck to the head, is a bit upset, I'm going to need an ambulance here to check her over. No bleeding, no visible injury, over. Do you see that?
Yes.
And I think that's the first time that you've asked for an ambulance for Constable Short, is that right?
Yes.
And then if you look on, please, to page 7 at 072428. I think you confirmed this morning. You make a transmission. Although there's no visible injuries to PC Short, she's been stomped to the body a few times, etc., and struck to the head. Can you see if an ambulance can attend ASAP? And you've explained that was after Ashley Tomlinson
Yes.
told you about the stamping, is that right?
Yes.
So we see that's the second time you've chased the
Yes.
ambulance. Well, it's
Yes.
first chase, but the second
Yes.
request for the ambulance. If you could turn then, please, to page 8. And at 072641, this is your next reference to an ambulance. And do we see that you say, I'm just looking to clarify that, has an ambulance been contacted for this accused also, over? Do you see that?
Yes.
So that's a reference, this accused, to Mr. Bio, is
Yes,
that
that's
right?
correct.
And then if you turn, please, to page 11. This is your next transmission about an ambulance or someone's condition.
Yes.
At 072930, towards the top of the page, do you see control, can you get a move on with the ambulance? This accused is now not breathing. CPR is commencing, over. Do you see that?
Yes.
And again, this accused is a reference to Mr. Bio, is that right?
That's correct.
And then if you turn over to the following page, please, page 12. This is your next communication about someone's condition. And we see at the top of the page, 073122, control, any update on the ambulance, we could really do with it here, over. You see that?
Yes.
Was that a chase for PC Short's ambulance or for Mr. Bio's ambulance?
Oh, Mr. Bayou's ambulance.
And then lastly, do we see at the same page, 073211, now there's no specific mention of the word ambulance here, but what you say is just for the call card, chest compressions commenced, however breaths have stopped due to cross-contamination, blood, etc.
Yes.
Was that a reference to Mr. Bio's condition
Yes, that's correct.
and a change in his condition?
Yes.
And does it appear from the controller's response that he's understood that to be another chase for the ambulance because he says ETA 2 minutes for the ambulance?
Yes.
So in terms of any impression that people might have, should they understand from that that 4 times you reported on Mr. Bio's condition and chased the ambulance,
Yes.
and 2 times you did that in respect of Constable Short?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir. Those are my questions.
Sergeant Maxwell, thank you very much for coming to give evidence to the inquiry. I'm going to rise briefly to allow the next witness to be introduced, and you'll be free to go then.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Graham, the next witness.
The next witness is Ashley Wyse, and she will be taken by my learned junior, Miss Thompson.
Good afternoon, Ms. Wyse. You're going to be asked questions by Ms. Thompson, whom I think you've met. But before that, will you say the words of the oath after me? Raise your hand, please. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Ms. Thompson.
What is your full name, please?
Ashley Isabel Wyse.
Is that Miss Wyse?
Miss.
May I ask how old you are?
37.
And am I right to understand that in May of 2015 you lived in Hayfield Road in Kirkcaldy?
Yes.
I'd like to begin by showing you an image of the street. Can we please look at the Stills catalogue, the first of the Stills catalogue, image 16, please? While we're waiting for that image to come up, can I ask you perhaps just to have a look in the folder in front of you, because I want to make sure that you've got everything that you need for giving your evidence today. And I think you should see, oh, here we are now, sorry. Can I have page 16, please? So in May of 2015, you lived in Hayfield Road, Ms. Wyse, and if you can look at the screen in front of you, is that an image of Hayfield Road?
Yes.
We have technology that allows you to leave a mark if you touch the screen, so I wonder whether you could put a circle on your house so that we can see where you lived. So that's the upstairs part of
Yes.
that building, is that right?
Yes.
And we've heard that a Kevin Nelson lived in the lower part of that building.
Yes.
Where is your entrance door? Is it to the right or the left of that window as we look at it?
To the right.
Perhaps if you touch that and another circle will appear. So that's your main door, up the path and in the main door there. And the number 1, where you have put that marker, that's your property. And which room within your property is that?
That is the bedroom.
The window to the left of that, again on the first floor, is that also part of your house?
Yes.
What room would that be?
That's the living room.
So your bedroom faces out onto Hayfield Road, as does your living room, and you lived upstairs from Kevin Nelson.
Yes.
Let's return to the folder in front of you. There should be a number of documents there, and the first should be a statement that you gave to a member of the inquiry team on the 22nd of February and the 8th of March of this year. Do you see that in the folder?
Yes.
If we could have that on the screen too, please. So this is your statement. If we could go to the final page, please. Do we see that you signed the statement on the 29th of May? You'll see that your signature has been blanked out on the screen, but your signature should feature in the hard copy in front of you. This should in fact be your signature on every page.
Yeah.
And if we look at the very last paragraph of your statement, do we see that it reads, I believe the facts stated in this witness statement are true. I understand that this statement may form part of the evidence before the inquiry and be published on the inquiry's website.
Yeah.
Do you see that? And if we look at the statement, the paragraph immediately above, that will be paragraph 35. Do we see that you said, I feel that my memory of the incident is good in places and other parts are hard to remember. My memory of the event would have been better at the time of giving statements to the police and Perk, that's the Police Independent Review Commissioner. The statement given to the police and Perk would have been truthful and to the best of my memory at that time. I think that my statements were read out to me, but I'm not 100% sure. Looking back, maybe the words that are used would not be what I would choose. I'm not saying that they're wrong, I'm just saying that it wouldn't be how I would phrase it. If there is any difference between what I have said now and my earlier statement to the police or Perk, those earlier statements should be preferred. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So you acknowledge in your inquiry statement that 7 years after the event that we're here to talk about today, your memory is not so good in places, and that if there are differences between your inquiry statement and your earlier statements, the chair should prefer your earlier statements.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Your earlier statement should also be in that folder, so let's just check that they're there. There should be, first of all, Perk 44,
Yeah.
and this is a statement that you gave to police officers, DC Cox and a DC Stark, on the 3rd of May at 7:45 in the evening. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And if we look, we'll see that you gave that statement at your home address to those detective constables. Now, when you gave the statement, Miss Wyse, did you tell the truth and do your best to give a complete and accurate account of what you had seen?
Yes.
Moving through the folder, the next document that should be there is Perk 43. And do we see that this is a statement that you gave 2 days later, on the 5th of May 2015, to Perk, an investigator, Maguire, at your home address?
Yes.
Again, were you telling the truth and doing your best to give a complete and accurate account of events?
Yes.
Next in your folder should be Perk 45. And this is a statement that you gave to an investigator, Rhodes, from the Perk on the 25th of August 2015, again at your home address. Do you have that statement before you too?
Yes.
And once again, did you tell the truth and do your best to give a complete and accurate account?
Yes.
For completeness, I think there will be 2 recognitions that you gave to the Crown Office in your folder too. We don't need to put these up on the screen, but they are COPFS 46 and 47.
Yeah.
Are they also in the folder?
Yes.
And do we see that COPFS 47 was a precognition statement that you gave on the 4th of October 2016 at the Fiscal's Office in Kirkcaldy?
Yes.
And COPFS 46 is a precognition statement that you gave on the 2nd of November 2016, again at Kirkcaldy.
Yes.
So if it would assist you at any time to look at these statements and what you said on previous occasions, then you should feel free to do so. There's also a spreadsheet in front of you. You can put that to one side for now, and we'll perhaps look at it together in a little while.
All right, okay.
So I want to ask you questions about the 3rd of May of 2015, and I want to do that by reference to your inquiry statement that you gave relatively recently. And you might find it helpful to have the hard copy handy, but the paragraphs that I'm going to refer to will pop up on the screen in front of you. So if we could perhaps pull up the statement, please. Ms. Taylor-Smith, thank you. And if we scroll down to paragraph 3, do we see that you say, you recall it was the 3rd of May 2015, you'd been out the night before and you'd been celebrating your birthday with friends.
Yes.
At the top of page 2, you explain that you'd had a few drinks and you were merry, but you weren't drunk.
Yes.
In paragraph 4, you explain that you woke up to a lot of noise in the morning and flashing lights. It was early morning. You think it was the back of 7 and it was light outside. I had Venetian blinds in my room and I slept with them partially open. They were half tilted so you could see out, but nobody could see in. It was the flashing lights that woke me up. Do Do you see that?
Yes.
So you've explained in your inquiry statement that it was the lights that first drew your attention to the fact that something was going on outside. If we scroll down to paragraph 5, you explain in paragraph 4 that you then went to the window, and in paragraph 5 you say, I seen police cars, and then I seen a couple of police officers across on the other side of the road on the big grassy part. There was a man on the ground surrounded by police. While there was a hedge there, I had a clear view of the police officers and the man. When I say he, I didn't know the man then. I now know it was Shekabayo. I could hear the noise of shouting. It was muffled through the window. The window was closed. It was more the muffle of noise that you heard. So I could hear shouting, but I couldn't make out what was being said. And then I literally ran and got Hazel. Who's Hazel?
Hazel's my friend.
And she spent the night at your house?
Yes.
Paragraph 6, you say, Hazel was still sleeping when I went through to the back bedroom. So should we understand that she had spent the night in the back bedroom and you were in the front bedroom? Yeah. I shook her on the shoulder and said, oh God, come and see what's happening out here. She followed me into my bedroom and we looked out of the window. I could still hear muffled noise and shouting. The man was on the ground with police officers around him. It was possibly 3 or 4 officers. I don't remember what the police officers looked like or whether they were in uniform. I do remember there was a lady walking about in a suit. I think it was grey. She looked smart compared to the rest of them, and I thought she was the one that was in charge. I think there were batons lying on the ground. I think a police officer picked one up and put it in their pocket. So you recall a lady police officer being there. Do you recall whether she was there when you first looked out of the window, or do you just recall that she was there at some point during the event?
Some point during the event.
You say there were possibly 3 or 4 officers around the man. Do you recall whether they were male or female officers?
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Okay. At paragraph 7, you say you could see what the police officers were doing. You weren't sure why the man was on the ground. It seemed he was getting arrested for something. I had seen that they were restraining him and taping his legs, and I thought the man must have been kicking off. I couldn't see the man moving. I could only see the police officers around him. I could see the yellow tape on the man's legs. The man was lying on his back. I could tell because I could see his feet pointing up. I couldn't see the man's face. You couldn't really see very much of the man. You could just see the man's knees and his legs. This was because the police officers were around him, but that's the best I can remember. I couldn't describe the man on the ground. I'll ask you more questions later about the position that the man was lying in, but is it your recollection that when you first saw him, his legs were taped and he was lying on his back?
I think they were in the middle of doing the tape.
In the middle of doing the taping?
Yeah.
All right. And is it your recollection that he was lying on his back?
I think so.
You think so?
I think so.
Is
yes.
it possible that you could be wrong about that or mistaken about that?
I'd say lying on his back.
At paragraph 8, you say the police officers were kneeling beside the man. They were down beside him. I'm asked if any of them were lying on the man. I can't be sure about the position of the police officers and whether any of them were lying or leaning on the man. One of the officers was quite alert and seemed to realise the man wasn't breathing. I'm sure he checked his pulse and then he done CPR. I don't remember what the police officer looked like who did the CPR, but I remember the guy that did it got a glass of water to rinse his mouth out. He got the glass of water from my downstairs neighbour, Kevin Nelson. Kevin lived in the flat directly underneath me. In later paragraphs, you go on to describe the CPR. Would it be fair to say that your recollection of the restraint perhaps isn't as good now, 7 years later, as it was at the time?
Yes.
And indeed, after you gave your best recollection of the incident in the paragraphs that we've just looked at, did the statement taker take you to passages within your Police Scotland and Perk statements to jog your memory.
Yes.
If we can move on to paragraph 12 then of your inquiry statement, so that we can see what parts of your earlier statements were read over to you and what you had to say. Paragraph 12 reads, I'm asked about the statement I gave to Perk on the 5th of May 2015. In this statement at page 1, I described getting home at about 3 a.m. and going to bed about 3:30. That sounds right. I'm told that my statement says at page 2 that when I woke that morning and looked out the window, I could hear shouting and a disturbance outside. It was right outside my room window. When I looked out of my window, I could see lots of police officers running about. I think there was about 10 to 15. There was lots of police vehicles, a grey one, a van, one at an angle at the tree, and the blue lights on the vehicles were on. And you said, that sounds right to me. I accept that it is correct if that's what I told the Perk at the time. So you've essentially adopted what you said on the 5th of May 2015 as being accurate. If we carry on, at paragraph 13, you say, I'm told my statement goes on to say at page 2, I looked to the right along Hayfield Road to where the police vehicles were. The lights were on. I thought it might have been something happening in the park opposite. There had been problems there in the past, and I looked across there at first to see what was happening, and there was nothing happening there. I then looked along the other way, along Hayfield Road towards the roundabout, to the left, down from my window. I saw a black man in the street. He was nearly down on the ground. He was surrounded by police officers. There was at least 6 police officers surrounding him. I saw the police all over him. What I mean is that they were holding him on the ground. And you said to the statement taker, that is right. The roundabout I'm talking about is the roundabout at the end of Hayfield Road where it joins with Henry Road. The police officers were holding him to restrain him and putting the tape on him. I don't remember what I meant by saying he was nearly to the ground, but it would have been what I told the Perk at the time. I got asked this question about 1 million times. Was he up? Was he down? And I think he must have been nearly down, meaning as in they were at the point of getting him down on the ground, and that's when all the police officers went on him. Miss Wyse, do you recall anything today about how the man came to be on the ground?
No, just what you've seen prior to in the video that I had is what is in my memory.
All right. Well, we'll come to the videos because we're going to watch those together in a little while. But before we look at the video, I'm keen to know what you can remember, relying on your memory. So it would appear to be the case that you said something to the Perk about the man being nearly down on the ground, and you've told me that you told the Perk the truth and did your best to give a complete and accurate account. But should we understand that you can't assist us any further today simply because of the passage of time, and you perhaps don't recall this part of the incident?
Yes.
Moving on to paragraph 14. I'm told my statement continues, what it looked like to me was that I saw a police officer striking the man on his legs to get him down. I'm not sure whether he was completely lying on the ground or was going down at that point. There was at least 6 police officers lying on top of him. They were crossing over him from both sides. They pretty much covered his whole body. It was only when I moved that I could see his arm and definitely knew it was a black man. It looked like one officer was using a baton to hold the man down. It was on his upper chest towards his throat. When the man was on the ground with the police officers on top of him, I could see him struggling with them. I saw them put some sort of yellow tape around his feet and legs over the ankle. And you said to the statement taker, if I said that at the time, then it will be true. But I don't remember that now. It's 7 years ago. The main thing that I remember now is him on the ground with the yellow tape on his legs and then getting resuscitated. I remember the batons on the floor, but I don't remember seeing them used. In your Perk statement that you were taken to by the inquiry team, you said that you recalled an officer striking the man on the legs to get him down. Do you remember that today?
No.
And you said You recalled at least 6 officers lying on top of him, covering his body. Again, today, looking back, do you have any recollection of that?
No, I just remember them being round him.
Although, as you said to the inquiry officer, if you said it at the time, then it would be true. And you've told me that you were doing your best to tell the truth when you spoke to the
Yes.
clerk. Moving on to paragraph 15. You were then taken to a passage in your Perk statement which read, "When the man was on the ground, I heard him screaming. It was a horrible sound. It sent chills through me. I heard the man shout to the police to get off him. They never moved from him at that point. I think the black man was on his back when lying on the ground. I'm not sure if he was moved whilst on the ground. I saw him lying on the ground. I could see that his wrists were restrained, his hands and arms were in front of him, and the police officers were still lying on top of him." He said, "I can't remember this now. There was lots and lots of shouting, but I remember more muffles. It's more muffled sounds that I've got in my head. What's in my memory is the police officers were restraining him and trying to get the tape on his legs. But if my statement says that, then I must have told Perk that at the time. I just don't remember now. It's so long ago."
Yes.
So again, can you assist us by telling us more today about what you could hear at the time?
I can't remember. I just have the more muffled noises. My window was shut, so I can't, like, it was just, you see that there was people that must have been speaking to each other, like, but I couldn't make out what it was, or...
Okay. And it appears that you did say to the Perk at the time that you heard the man screaming. It was a horrible sound and it sent chills through you. Should we understand that you have no recollection of that today?
No, I can't remember that now.
But if you said that to the Perk, then would that have been you telling the truth and
Yes.
doing your best to give a complete and accurate account?
Yes.
Moving to paragraph 16, you were asked about a recognition that you'd given to the Crown Office, which reads, "The police officers holding the man, Sheku, down and lying on him so he couldn't move. There was one at the top, one at the side and one at his feet. There were a lot of police officers around him. I might be wrong in saying 6, but there was a few. Sheku or Shek was putting up a fight. I could hear mumbling and shouting, but I couldn't hear what was being said because my window was closed." And again you said to the statement taker, "I just remember there was a lot of noise, but I don't remember that. I just remember everybody was shouting at each other. I remember muffling noises. The window was shut. I don't remember the police officers lying on Sheku now. I just remember them being around him. As I've said before, what comes into my head now is I remember the tape round his feet, him lying on the ground, and the police officers round him."
Yes.
There's a reference there to Sheku putting up a fight. Again, do you have any recollection of that now?
No.
So can you assist us at all as to how he was putting up a fight, or can you simply have no recollection of that today?
No.
At paragraph 17, you were then taken to your police statement from the 3rd of May, so that's the first of the statements that you gave, in which you said the man kept making roaring noises and shouted something similar to "get off me." I'm also reminded that in a Perk statement of the 5th of May, I said I heard the man shout to the police to get off him. I'm asked what version of events is more accurate. I'm aware that the Crown Office statement was given 18 months or so after it happened. I'm assuming the statement given closest to the time when it happened would be the most accurate, which would be the Perk and police statements. If my police statement and Perk statement say that, then I must have said that at the time, and that must be what happened. But as I say, I don't remember that now. I just remember a lot of muffling and lots of activity and noise. My memory would be clearer when I first gave a statement, but at the same time, it all happened so fast. Moving on to paragraph 18, a further passage from your Perk statement from the 5th of May was read to you. There then seemed to be a pause, a break. The man had been quiet for a little while. In this period, the police officers appeared to be speaking with him. I could not hear any of his responses, but it appeared the police officers were having a conversation with him. I think the police officers were lying on top of him a long time. I think it was at least 5 minutes they were lying on top of him. It may have been about 10 minutes. This includes the time when he was being taped to his legs. At all times he was surrounded by police officers. There were at least 6 police officers around him at all times. He said to the statement taker, I don't remember the police officers having a conversation with the man. I also don't remember the police officers lying on him now. I just remember the police officers around him, restraining him and putting the tape on. I remember him getting restrained and the officers holding him down. Again, if I told Perk that back then I accept it must be right. Miss Wyse, is there anything more that you can add to the passages that we have looked at from your inquiry statement today? Nothing more comes back to you at all?
No, sorry.
Well, there's no reason to apologise. I just want to be sure that we have your complete and full evidence today. All right. I'd like to take you now to some of the footage that you mentioned, because we understand that you recorded parts of this incident on your mobile telephone, and that you later gave your phone to the police. Is
Yes.
that right? Was that fairly soon after the event?
Yes.
Was it when you spoke with the police on the 3rd of May?
There or around.
There or thereabouts. Certainly, I think when you spoke with the Perk on the 5th of May, you said that you had given your
Yeah.
phone to the police and you'd given the police permission to examine it and to look at the footage, and you
Yes.
were also happy for the Perk to do the same.
Yes.
Is that right? So it must have been somewhere between the 3rd of May and the 5th of May
Yes.
that you gave your phone to the police. Would that make sense?
Yes.
Now, when you went to the window that morning to see what was happening outside, where was your phone?
At the side of my bed. And then I took my phone in my hand and took the video.
What I'm wondering is whether you had to move away from the window to get your phone, or whether you had taken your phone with you when you went to the window.
I can't remember. I think I had my phone in my hand maybe, or...
And do you recall whether you watched much of what was happening outside before you started to film?
I can't remember.
All right. Now, I mentioned a spreadsheet earlier, and I think this would be a good time to ask you to have the spreadsheet in front of you, because what I would like to do is try to be clear about where the bits of footage that you took fit into the timeline of
Okay.
events. So I don't know whether you've had the opportunity to watch any other witnesses give their evidence on our channel, but if you have, then you will perhaps realise that we have got footage from a number of different sources. We've got some CCTV footage from the Gallagher's pub, the White Heather at the roundabout, from dash cams, from other mobile phones, and your Snapchat footage. We also have airwaves, police airwave transmissions, and 999 calls. And what we have done with a little professional help is put that in a real evidence timeline. So all of the footage and all of the transmissions are played against a real time clock, and the timings have all been checked. And that allows us to see and hear what was happening at any given point in time. So this spreadsheet is essentially a record of what can be seen and heard in this real evidence timeline. So if you have a look at the spreadsheet, you'll see that we've got the actual real times in the far left column.
Okay.
And not all of this will be relevant for our purposes, but we've then got the caller ID, so where airwave transmissions have been made by the police, there's a note of who made the transmission. In the next column, headed Event Airwave Transcription, there's a transcript of what is said over the airwaves. And in the next column along, Description of Visible Events in Video, there is a written description of what can be seen happening in the video footage. And in the very final column at the far right, there's confirmation as to the source of any video footage at that time. So, for example, you will see on the first page that some of the footage is from a dash cam, some is from Robson Kohlberg's mobile phone, and some is from Gallagher's pub. And as we work our way through our spreadsheet, you will see entries that relate to the footage from your mobile phone. Okay. So before we look at the first of the pieces of footage that you took, I think there were 3 or 4. There are certainly 3 that have been included in this timeline. I thought it might be helpful if we can just be clear about what had happened before you came to the window and started to film, just so that we can see where the footage fits in with the overall timeline of events. Okay. So I just want to draw a few entries to your attention, just to give some context to the footage that you took. So we can perhaps begin at 7:20 and 13 seconds, which you'll find on page 3 of the footage. And the entry that I'd like to draw your attention to there is the column just to the right of the midpoint of the page that's got the description of what can be seen on the Gallagher's CCTV footage. And you'll see that it records that a large marked police van arrives from the south on Henry Road and turns right at the roundabout into Hayfield Road. Do you see that?
Yes.
And we've heard evidence that that was the first of the police vehicles to arrive. There were 2 officers, Constable Payton and a Constable Walker, and that was their van arriving at the scene. And if you stay in that column and skip down 2 entries, you'll see that the van stops on Hayfield Road within the field of view of the camera, and that's at 7:20 and 23 seconds. Do you see that?
Yep.
The next entry that I would like to draw your attention to is at 7:20 and 30 seconds. And again, it's the description column that is relevant here. And it records that a smaller marked police van arrives travelling north on Henry Road, turning right at the roundabout into Hayfield Road. Do you see that entry?
Yes.
And staying in the same column, if you skip down 3 entries, you'll see that at 7:20 and 39, that smaller police van stops behind the large police van.
Yes.
Do you see that? And we've heard evidence that that was the second police vehicle on the scene, and Constables Tomlinson and Short were within that vehicle. If you turn over to page 4, Miss Wyse. If you can look at the entry timed 7:21:02. It's a transmission by PC Payton. Do you see that?
Yes.
Officers injured, PC Short, male. And if you look just a little bit to the right, and the next entry down in the description column, you'll see that a second after that transmission was made, you can see on the footage a number of persons appearing behind a light-coloured car, and at least one person appeals to fall over. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the chair has heard evidence that that may have been a Constable Short falling to the ground. If you look at the description immediately beneath that, and it's quite a long description, and it spans 10 seconds of CCTV footage from 7:21:03 to 7:21:13. A car moves forward quickly towards the roundabout, appears to skid. At the same time this is happening, it appears the persons near the pavement possibly stand again or are joined by other persons and there is some coming together and another fall towards the ground by one or more of the persons. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the chair has heard evidence that may lead him to the conclusion that that was the point at which Mr. Bayo was taken to the ground. At 7:21 and 19, you'll see in red that a Constable Tomlinson's emergency status on his police radio was turned to on. Do you see that?
Yes.
And we've heard evidence from Constable Tomlinson, and he told us that by the time he pressed his emergency button, Mr. Bayo was on the ground. Okay?
Okay.
And briefly over the page, Miss Wyse. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed out one entry at the bottom of page 4, my apologies. At the bottom of page 4, at 7:21:28, there is a description of another police vehicle with flashing lights arriving at the scene and stopping on Hayfield Road. Do you see that?
Yes.
And we've heard that that was the third vehicle to attend, and Constables Good and Smith were within that vehicle. And then over the page, on page 5, there's an entry at 7:21:46, and the description is of a fourth vehicle arriving at the scene and stopping on Hayfield Road. Do you see that?
Yes.
And we've heard that that was the fourth police vehicle to arrive, carrying Constables Gibson and McDonough. So I realise I've taken quite a lot of your time going through that, and you won't have seen this before, but I thought it might be of some assistance, because if you cast your eye down at the spreadsheet, you'll see that we're just about to come to the first snippet of footage that you took, and it gives some context in terms of what had happened before you started filming from your bedroom window. So I wonder if we could perhaps now play the first piece of Snapchat footage, which is at 7:22:10 to 7:22:20, please. If we stop there for a moment, do you recognise that, Miss Wyse?
Yes.
And you recognise that as being the piece of footage that you took
Yes.
from your bedroom window?
Yes.
Now, there's no sound there. Was there nothing to be heard, or were you not sound recording? Can you say?
I wouldn't be able to tell you why there wasn't any sound. Maybe it was on mute or something like that.
All right. Now, it's a very short piece of footage, and it happens very quickly, but I think we do have a version which has been slowed down and enlarged, and I wonder if we can perhaps watch that. This is the same footage, Miss Wyse, but it's been slowed down. Can pause that for a moment, please. Thank you. Before we looked at that footage, I drew your attention to a number of the entries on the spreadsheet, including the entry at 7:21 7:21:03, which was when Shekobayo was taken to the ground, between 7:21:03 and 7:21:13. So this first piece of footage was taken at 7:22:10 to 7:22:20. So it's roughly 1 minute into the restraint. Okay, just to put that in context. You said it was familiar to you, it's the footage that you took, you recognised the view from your bedroom window. I wonder if we can look at the slow version of the footage again. Does watching this, and in particular watching it in slow motion, jog your memory at all about what you saw that day?
My memory is kind of what you see there is what I remember.
What you remember, all right. We can pause it there, thank you. You said, Miss Wyse, that what we see is what you remember. Can you assist us at all in terms of what we can see on the screen in front of us there?
Just the restraint and the vehicles being in the street and kind of...
Okay. If we could watch the slow motion footage again, please. And I'll ask you to pause part of the way through this. You could pause there, please. You've made a number of references in your statements to the man's legs being taped. And we have heard evidence that leg restraints were indeed applied. And if you look at the footage, do you see there are two officers who are standing up, one on the right and one just in front of the police car?
Mm-hmm.
If I can ask you to look at the officer just in front of the police car, because he has given evidence that we can see him in this footage unfolding the restraints before applying the restraints. So if we could watch from here just for a second or two, please. Do you see that he appears to have something in his hands?
Yes.
That he appears to be unfolding?
Yes.
And we heard from him that was those were the leg restraints, and he was preparing the leg restraints. So it would appear to be the case that this footage was taken before the leg restraints were applied. But if I understand your evidence correctly, and if I've read your statement correctly, your best recollection is at the moment in time that the restraints are being put on, or are in fact on. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And do you recall whether the screams or shouts or muffled sounds that you have spoken about were happening at this point in the events?
I think there was lots of activity at that time, so yeah, there was kind of, the police officers must have been talking to each other or something, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what they were saying. As I said, it was more a muffled noise that I could hear.
Sure. I'm just wondering whether you can help us with whether your phone wasn't picking up the sound for whatever reason, or whether in fact there was no noise at that point in time.
I wouldn't be able to tell you that.
All right. Before we go to the second piece of footage, again, if you'll bear with me, can we go back to the spreadsheet just to put it in context?
Okay.
So I've advised you that first piece of footage was about a minute into the restraint. If we then look at the entry at 7:22 and 24 seconds, which is on page 5 of the spreadsheet. It's a transmission from a PC Walker. Do you see that?
Oh, yeah.
Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
Update, male in cuffs, still struggling. Then immediately down from that and to the right, we see at 7:22 and 25, another vehicle arrives on the scene. Do you see that?
Yes.
It's the entry, a smaller marked police car arrives at the scene. Do you see that?
Yep.
So that's the fifth vehicle to arrive, and we've heard that there was a Sergeant Maxwell in that vehicle. If we move over the page to 7:23 and 57, again, the description column, there's a reference to a dark-coloured vehicle approaching, and it appears to have flashing lights at the rear window. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And we may hear evidence that that is CID or plainclothes officers arriving. And then at 7:25 and 17, this is on page 7, and it's an airwave transmission. 7:25:17, do you see that?
Yes.
It's a transmission by PC Alan Smith. This male now certainly appears to be unconscious, breathing, not responsive, get an ambulance for him. So at 7:25 and 17 seconds, Mr. Bayo was unresponsive and the officers radioed for an ambulance. Now, the next piece of Snapchat footage is less than 15 seconds later, 2 minutes and 15 seconds later, it's at 7:27 and 31. And I wonder if we could perhaps look at this. So this footage that we're about to look at is 2 minutes and some seconds after Mr. Bayo became unresponsive, to put this in context. So 7:27 and 31, thank you.
I'll go on under control now. Thanks.
Look at this. This is just not your average.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, we can stop that there. Again, did you recognise that?
Yes.
Is that footage that you took from your bedroom window?
Yes.
And whose voice is that we hear?
Mine.
That's your voice. Okay. How did that image fit with your overall recollection of what happened that day?
It's just kind of how I remember it, kind of then the police officers coming off, like stepping away from him, and then they were doing the resuscitation.
Can you tell me any more about that? The guy checked to see if he was breathing. Obviously he knew something wasn't right, so he started doing CPR, and then he got a glass of water from my downstairs neighbour, Kevin. Okay. The next piece of footage is at 7:29 and 30 seconds, please. Oh, I beg your pardon, sorry, 7:28, I'm sorry, 7:28 and 18 seconds, it's my mistake. Thanks.
Alpha Yankee.
Okay, it was a very short piece of footage, but again, do you recognise that as footage taken by you from your bedroom window?
Yes.
There doesn't appear to be any sound there, and again, can you help us as to whether there simply was no noise in the background or whether your camera wasn't recording for sound for whatever reason?
I don't know.
You can't say. All right. And was that familiar to you in terms of your overall memory of the scene?
Yes.
And what did you see going on there?
Just the police officers walking around.
So that was at 7:28 and 18 seconds. So that was about 3 minutes after Mr. Bayo became unresponsive. And I can advise that at 7:29 and 30 seconds, if we have a look at that entry in the spreadsheet, it's on page 11. 7:29 and 30 seconds. Do you see that?
Yes.
It's another transmission, this time by an acting Sergeant Scott Maxwell. Control, can you get a move on with the ambulance? This accused is now not breathing. CPR is commencing. Over. Do you see that?
Yes.
So this third piece of footage is about 3 minutes after Mr. Bayo became unresponsive and about a minute before there was a radio message to Control to say that he had stopped breathing and CPR was commencing. And you do recall seeing the CPR take place, is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about that today, what you remember of it?
No, just the police officers kept going until the ambulance arrived, didn't stop. And then the ambulance people came and took over, and that was it.
You said one of the officers went and got a glass of water from Kevin Nelson.
Yeah. Yeah, he did.
We can put the spreadsheet to one side for now, and if we could go back to your inquiry statement, please. To paragraph 6, which we have looked at before. At the bottom of that paragraph, you say, if we can scroll to the top of the next page, please, thank you. I do remember there was a lady walking about in a suit, I think it was grey. She looked smart compared to the rest of them, and I thought that she was in charge. And I'd asked you earlier whether you could remember whether she'd been there at the outset when you looked out the window or whether she arrived later. Now, I don't think we saw her in the first video clip, but she was there in the second and third video clips. Is it possible that she didn't arrive on the scene until a little bit later on?
She may have. I can't recall that, though.
All right.
When she arrived, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Okay. But would you accept that we don't see her in the first of the video clips?
Yes.
Now, we've looked at these three pieces of footage and we've looked at the timestamps on them. The timestamp on the first is 7:22, the timestamp on the second is 7:27. So 5 minutes passed between the first video clip that you took and the second video clip that you took. What were you doing during that 5 minute period?
Just looking out the window, and I think I got Hazel at one point, and then Hazel came to the window as well, so she was with me.
Okay. So was there a period of time then that you were watching what was happening, but you weren't actively filming it?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember anything about what happened during that period of time?
No.
If we can go back to your inquiry statement to paragraph 25. You were shown the footage, I think, by the inquiry team when you gave your statement, and about halfway down is a sentence that begins, what is in the third video. It's about halfway down that paragraph there. You say, what is in this third video is largely how I remember what I saw that morning. I'm unsure of the order of these three videos in terms of what was happening. The videos don't jog any further memories of that day. Do you see that?
Yes.
So we've looked at all three pieces of footage, and that third video was the one that was shortly before the call to Control to say that Mr. Bayo was no longer breathing, when there were a number of officers around him. And you say that is essentially what you saw that morning. That is how you remember what you saw that morning. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there anything at all that you can add to your recollection or to what you've told the inquiry team or told us today in your evidence about what you saw that day?
No.
And you say that watching the clips didn't jog your memory, and I think you were also shown some still images that had been taken from the clips, and did they jog your memory either?
No.
I want to ask you a few more questions about the position that the man was lying in. If we can go back to paragraph 7 of your statement. About halfway down, you say that the man was lying on his back. And above that, you say, sorry, it's perhaps easier if I read from the beginning rather than jumping around. You said you could see what the officers were doing. You weren't sure why the man was on the ground. I had seen they were restraining him and taping his legs, and I thought the man must have been kicking off. So this is your memory at the point in time at which his legs were being taped. Is that right?
Yes.
See, I couldn't see the man moving. I could only see the police officers around him. I could see the yellow tape on the man's legs. The man was lying on his back. I could tell you because I could see his feet pointing up. So you recall him being on his back at the point in time that the tape is around his legs. Is that right?
Yes, because then they went straight to resuscitation after.
They went straight to resuscitation after that?
Yeah.
All right. What do you mean by they went straight to resuscitation after?
That's just how my memory is of what I have, you know, like of how it took place kind of thing.
All right.
You know, tapes was on and then they knew there was something wrong when they went to the resuscitation.
I see. So your memory is that as soon as the tape was on, the next thing to happen
The next
was
thing to happen, yes.
the CPR. All right. Are you able to help us with what position he was in during the earlier part of the restraint before the tape was applied to his legs?
I couldn't be sure.
Okay, I want to move away from the events of the 3rd of May and ask you some questions about statements and people asking you to give them statements or otherwise give them information. So we know that you gave a statement to the police, 2 statements to the Perk, and 2 statements to the Crown. I understand from reading your inquiry statement that other people also came to the door wanting to ask you questions about what you had seen. Is that right?
Yes.
If we can go to paragraph 27 of your inquiry statement. Where again you were taken back to an earlier statement that you gave to the Perk, and it related to a man coming to your door. And you'd said to the Perk, he didn't introduce himself, but I just assumed he was Sheku's brother. He continued by talking about his mother and that they were looking for answers. He stated that they had been given 5 different stories or 5 different states of events, and he told me the police stated that Sheku had been carrying a knife when he wasn't. He was calm with me, not aggressive, and I did not feel threatened by him, but I did feel that he was putting me on the spot. This made me feel uncomfortable because I didn't know what to say to him and I didn't want to lie to him. You said to the statement taker, yes, that's all correct. And what I mean by saying uncomfortable was because they're looking for answers that I don't have. I felt I can't keep going to my door and not knowing who was going to be there. Often the door had chapped, but I didn't answer it because I had to go down a flight of stairs. However, this time, obviously, I did. And I beg your pardon, I should have taken you firstly to paragraph 26. I understand that in paragraph 27 you were describing a second visit from this gentleman. My apologies, I've taken this out of sequence, but in paragraph 26 you say, I'm asked about when I was visited by a member of Sheku's family. I think it was his brother. He was very pleasant, he wasn't aggressive, but he was asking me questions. I can't remember what they were, but he was just going around things of my family and I are looking for answers. That's what made me twig that it was his brother or a cousin or something, because he was black. By that point, I knew that it was a black man that had passed away, and that's when I just got to the point and said enough was enough. You were trying to live your life and people were coming to the door asking you questions and I don't have the answers. It's all the other people that it affects as well. Like seeing someone coming to my door and wondering what it's all about. In paragraph 27, when you said you didn't know what to say and you didn't want to lie, what did you mean by that?
I guess when, you know, you had lots of people coming to the door and looking for answers, I didn't have the answers, and, you know, I just kind of wanted to move on with my life.
You said lots of people were coming to the door. Who was all coming to your door?
There was media, and people would be sitting in cars outside the house, and it was just one of those things that I just wanted to kind of, enough was enough. So, you know, something had to be done. You know, as much as we lived there, we still had to live our own life and not feel like you were looking out your window to see who was there before you could exit your house.
Okay. If we can look at paragraph 28. You said you didn't remember a second visit from someone in Sheku's family, but again you were taken to a previous statement where you said, I heard a knock at the door and I looked out the window into the street to see if I could see anyone's car. I was not expecting anyone to be calling, so I ignored the door, and it's not uncommon for me to do that if I don't know who's there. I continued to look out the window and saw a black male walking away from the house. Again, the male was very smartly dressed, and I got the impression it was the same male that had been at the door a fortnight previously. He began to lean over the hedge, and I wondered what he was doing, and as such I didn't pay attention to his description. I immediately felt intimidated, and I felt that I was having to hide behind my own curtains. I came away from the window and didn't go back. Later on that night, about 7:45, I went to my door to give access to a friend and saw a leaflet lying on the floor inside the door. On lifting the leaflet, I could see it had a picture of Sheku Bayo on it, and that it had the title Justice for Sheku Bayo Campaign. Below the title and picture, there was a paragraph of events which was typed, and below that a framed box in which there was written in pen, Hi, the family have seen footage/stills, photos of a video that was handed to the police/Perk. Can you talk to us about the family? About what you saw. I thought immediately the handwritten note was specifically a reference to my footage, and that information and footage had been given out by Police Scotland or Perk without them telling me they were doing it. I felt betrayed by this information being exposed, and I felt that I should have been made aware so that I could have been more prepared. I felt this was a personal threat, and I panicked that they may be watching my house. I was scared. So did you understand this footage, or the reference to the footage, to be the footage that you had taken from your phone, taken on your phone, and given to the police? Okay. When you said that you felt betrayed, can you explain what you meant by that?
I guess I just wish I knew that the police was given the evidence to the family, so I was more aware of what they saw and, you know, what I saw.
When you said you felt that this was a personal threat, what did you mean by that?
I just felt like I should have been told prior to my images being shared.
And when you said that you panicked, can you help me to understand why you panicked?
I guess I was just trying to protect my little one at the time, you know, so I was kind of more worried about him at that point.
And you said that you were scared. What were you scared of?
I think just the, I'd maybe say more panic would be the word. I would just, looking back, thinking, you know, well, I was trying to protect my little one, you know, and for his well-being, and not wanting media and people coming to the house and asking me questions in front of him because he didn't know anything that was going on.
And had there been times that the media had come to your door?
The door had tapped a good few times.
Did you answer it?
No.
Did you look out to see who had been at the door?
Yeah, I'd looked out the window, but other than that, I never answered it.
Okay. Can you say who it was that had been coming to your door?
Couldn't tell you.
And you mentioned cars sitting outside as well?
Yes.
Do you know who was sitting in the cars?
No.
Did you form a view as to who was likely to be sitting in the cars?
No, I just ignored and walked the other way.
And you said in your evidence you got to the point where you thought enough is enough.
Correct.
And was it at that point that you made contact with the Perk to make them aware that all of this was going on?
Yes,
And did you give a statement to them about what had been going on?
I think so. I couldn't be sure.
Bear with me a second, please. One final thing, Miss Wyse, was your bedroom window open or closed throughout this incident?
Closed.
Was it closed the whole time? Did you open it at any point?
No, it's closed.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Are there any Rule 9 applications for this witness? Ms. Mitchell? Nobody else. Right. Ms. Wyse, I wonder if you could go back to the witness room just for a little while I hear some legal submissions.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Mitchell.
Just two matters briefly, my lord. The first is in a Perk Statement, Perk 43, given by Ashley Wyse on the 5th of May, that being 2 days after the incident. At page 4 of 6, on the third paragraph from the bottom, she indicates, "In my mind, I thought they were being really rough with this guy. I did not know what happened before. I mean, it was the way they were pouncing on the guy. I felt that they were very close to him, that he had no space." And I was wondering whether or not she might add to her recollection, if she has any, of what she means by those phrases. The next issue I would like to raise is in relation to one of the last points touched upon, which was her experience of receiving a letter through her door asking about whether or not the family of Sheikh Abayo could speak to her, and to ascertain whether or not she understood that they may have been going to other houses in the area as well and may have spoken to other people. And the inquiry will recall, of course, that evidence has already been heard that family members did go and speak to other people and were asked various things about it as well. And finally, a question as to whether or not she was ever contacted, when she was speaking about all the people that were contacting her, was she ever contacted by John Sallins, or was there a card left by him asking to get in contact?
Yes. Very well, I shall allow you to ask these questions. So if you could perhaps rearrange the seating, please. Ms. Wyse, you're going to be asked some questions by Miss Mitchell, QC, who's at the end of the table now, and she represents the Bio family. Do you understand?
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Mitchell.
I'd like to ask you about something that you said in one of your statements, and I'll have it brought up. This is a statement which was given by you on the 5th of May 2015, so that was just 2 days after the event. We're looking at page 4 of 6. And the third last paragraph there, do you see the paragraph that starts, the short paragraph, just 3 lines that starts, "In my mind"?
Yes.
Could you read that for us?
In my mind, I thought they were being really rough with this guy. I didn't know what had happened before this. I mean, it was the way they were pouncing on the guy. I felt that they were very close to him and he had no space.
Now, do you remember saying that at the time?
I can't remember that now.
No. Do you remember that feeling that you had, that they were being rough with this guy? Do you remember thinking that?
I can't. I can't remember, sorry.
No. It said, it was the way they were pouncing on the guy. Can you help us in any way with what you might have meant there?
I think what I meant was I don't know how you restrain somebody. So if, maybe you were having to be a little bit more straight to the point to do what they needed to do to restrain.
What do you mean, if you can help the inquiry with, what do you mean by straight to the point?
Just if he wasn't doing what the police officer was asking them to do.
If they weren't doing what the police officers asked them to do, then what?
Well, as I've said, I don't know how you restrain someone.
Yes.
So, if the police officers were being more rougher, if that's what I've said, to restrain someone, I don't know how you do that. So, I can't answer your question anymore.
Okay. You also said, I felt that they were very close to him and that he had no space. Can you help us with what you meant when you said that?
Just what I've said before, the police officer's been around him, that's what I've said.
Okay. Can we move on to another issue now? And at the end of your evidence, you were speaking to my learned friend about a leaflet coming through the door.
Yes.
And there was some handwriting on it asking
Yes.
about footage. Now, were you aware that the family might have been going to other houses nearby you?
I don't know.
No. Do you know Kevin Nelson?
Yes.
Did you ever speak to Kevin Nelson at all about anyone approaching you?
Not really.
When you say not really...
No.
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 Okay. The final issue I would like to ask you about was, you talked about various people coming to your door, and you said that you were contacted by the media. Were you ever contacted by someone called John Sallins?
I can't remember.
Okay. Does that name ring a bell with you at all?
Not really.
Did anybody ever leave a card asking you to call them back?
There was cards and leaflets that got put through the door, but I just to pick them up, put them in the bin.
Okay, and did the cards or leaflets relate to the incident?
Yes.
And did any of the cards or leaflets ask you to call back?
I can't remember what was on them.
But you just disposed of them in any event?
Yes.
No further questions.
Ms Wyse, thank you very much for coming to give evidence to the inquiry. We're about to stop for the day, and when that happens, you'll be free to go.
Okay.
Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.